Okay, let's move our last modules here. Health and safety policies. Implement, monitor, and promote organizational and supply chain safety policies and procedures. Safety rule of thumb. Everyone should grow old enough with all their appendages intact to be a problem to their children. It's your goal in life. And 2, if it looks dangerous 9 times out of 10, it probably is. All right, laws and regulations. Buyers must be able to address the issue of compliance with environmental health and safety laws in the country where they work and in each country in which they conduct business. So if you're buying parts from Asia, you got to know what their health and safety laws are. In the USA, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, otherwise known as OSHA, from 1970, Congress put together this act to establish workplace safety standards, provide rules for conducting investigations of accidents, implement record-keeping requirements, and require research on safety in the workplace. So before this, there really were no rules. When they were building the Golden Gate Bridge in the early 1930s during the Depression, jobs were so hard to find that they didn't have any kind of safety equipment. Guys would fall off the girders and stuff and die. And they had what they called the vulture line, which was all the guys waiting to take that guy's place, next guy up for a job. Nothing ever happened to the companies. Nobody ever roped up. It's just the way they rolled back in the day. So states have also enacted their own versions of OSHA. So there's federal OSHA and there's state OSHAs. And in most contract clauses and T's and C's should include a compliance with the law clause to ensure the supply base meets OSHA requirements. So PACCAR has this on paragraph 17 of their T's and C's. OSHA carries both criminal and civil penalties for managers when there are violations. So if manager is negligent, it can be criminal. The legal trend is to hold third parties, buyers, accountable when they know about the violations but not do anything about it. So if you keep buying from the company and you know there's all kind of safety violations there and their place burns down and you have a lot of people die, it's going to be very bad for you. Occupational Safety and Health Administration is part of the U.S. Department of Labor. And the WHO, the World Health Organization, is a division of the United Nations. Also has a universal precautions protocol. So personal liability, taking a person on a plant tour through a dangerous, unauthorized area. If you do that, you are personally liable and can be sued outside of the company. Organizational liability. Laws in many countries require the employer to ensure safety in the workplace. And most of the European, Asian, and North American countries do that. And Department of Transportation is responsible for regulations concerning safety and transport in the air and on the water and the ground. So most other countries have an equivalent. Most of the developed countries will have some kind of occupational health and safety rules. International labor standards are some codes of practice for the organization. So Occupational Safety and Health Convention from 1981 provides for the adoption of a national occupation and health policy and promotes framework for the Occupational Safety and Health Convention. Promotes preventative safety and health culture. In Europe, you have the ROHS, which we've talked about in the past, places a restriction on certain hazardous substances and electronic stuff, also includes medical devices. Registration, evaluation, authorization, and restriction of chemical substances, otherwise known as REACH, is another EU regulation on chemicals and their safe use. very similar to the SDS in the United States. And then the we've talked about before too. Recycling and recovery targets for electrical goods. Liability is perpetual and never ends. They always ask that as a question. Policies and procedures, employee safety. So there's training requirements. Provide training on things like personal protective equipment, otherwise known as PPE, fire drills, etc. Buyers should require suppliers to provide certification of their safety training. And when you're at a buyer's facility, if they're doing a good job with safety, that will be one of the first things that plant manager wants to show you the stats on. And they usually will keep it on a board somewhere public. If they're not doing a good job, they'll probably try to avoid it altogether. Personal protective equipment. Company must provide things like helmets, goggles, toe caps. Managers can be liable if they don't. SDSs must be on file for toxic materials. Can include cleaning materials and copier toner. Must be posted in an area where the employees are working, they can find the stuff. And list safety procedures and emergency response techniques. SDS is provided by the supplier of the material. And work environment safety, office and warehouse safety guidelines for ensuring a safe work environment include things like proper uniforms. If you need protective gear, designate proper emergency exits and don't block them. Open discussions, ensure time for discussions on safety rules, general working environment, promote health codes, prominently display health codes in relevant areas, and proofing the building, inspect the building regularly to detect needed improvements. Supplier and subcontractor safety. So audit. Buyer cannot eliminate the liability with a contract clause. If you know they're operating in an unsafe manner, then you could be liable. Check suppliers and subcontractors' safety history. So OSHA requires records of workplace injuries be kept. Best-in-class companies will have safety goals, which are measured by a couple of things like all injury incident rate or the lost workday injury rate. See if this works. Yeah, so this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Kind of talks about the injury rates and how to determine them. So this all injury incident rate is number of injuries and illnesses times 200,000 divided by employee hours worked, which is the incident rate. So if you got 40 hours times 50 work weeks times 100 employees, that's where they get the 200,000 from. And then you've got another stat called lost workday injury rate. It's the number of injuries with lost work days times 200,000 divided by the total hours worked. So if you're doing this on an annual, total hours worked would be annual for the year. 40 times however many employees you got. Also called days away, restricted, or transferred, or otherwise known as DART. It's the lost workday injury rate. Training. Many companies require suppliers and subcontractors to participate and keep records of training. Training can be done over the internet. Organizations should review requirements and best practices in their industry. So organizations must meet or exceed all industry-specific requirements for health and safety. Need to stay abreast of changes in the regulations. And if you move into a new country, you need to understand what their requirements are. So best practices, there's various websites dedicated to promoting and disseminating such best practices for health and safety. OSHA in the UK and safety executive officers, such sites. So storage requirements, systems should be established for the storage and maintenance of documents. Talked about this before. And then documentation, dissemination policies. Organizations' performance relative to the policies should also be documented, otherwise known as an audit. And then you've got customer-driven requirements. So customers in the consumer products and food industry have supply chain safety a very important factor to the company, or have made. So yeah, if you're in certain industries, it's very visible. So newsworthy incidents of fires, earthquakes, damage, etc. at your suppliers can impair your brand image. So if your textile plant that you use in Bangladesh burns down and kills a bunch of their workers because they blocked all the fire exits, it's going to look really bad for you. All right, so today in a global environment, safety and health issues not only apply to safety of the work environment, employees and supplier personnel, but also apply to intellectual property rights, no. Product regulations, possibly. Environmental hazards, safety and health issues, ethical conduct in foreign countries, no. So I would say you have to pick between B and C, and C sounds like the better answer to me. Oh, it's B, because health, safety, and laws and directives cover product regulations, chemicals, and other materials by assuming that products sold on the public market do not contain harmful elements. That's kind of a weird question. You see those every once in a while. Individuals or corporations in the U.S. may be held liable for injuries to persons injured while on a plant tour under which of these laws? So if you take somebody through a plant tour at one of our PACCAR plants and they get injured, you could be held liable for it if you're conducting a tour. And where that's going to come through is not this, not that. It's either going to be criminal law or personal liability. I think personal liability is probably the more correct answer. Option C, personal liability, yeah. A is incorrect, it's not applicable to this type of activity, so it's not criminal unless you're really, really negligent. All right, there are 7 questions out there. So go ahead and start working on them. And raise your hand when you get done. We'll go over the answers. Okay, let's go over some answers. Number one is alpha, because proper records retention is critical to show an organization's efforts to comply with safety standards, but does not actually improve that compliance. And number two is also alpha, because the OSHA established the Occupational Safety and Health Administration Agency. Three is delta, because guidance from legal counsel is important to reduce not only organizations' potential liability, but also possible personal liability. Four is Bravo. While not a panacea, this imposes an extra level of responsibility on suppliers as it ties suppliers' actions to US or EU laws. Five is Delta, because per OSHA standards, companies must make available and post the location of SDSs. Six is Bravo. What Helen has now, because what Helen has now is hearsay from another supplier, probably a competitor. Needs to find out for herself if there's a problem. Seven is Charlie. The incident rate for the most serious cases is computed as 3 times 200,000 divided by 400,000. So 600,000 divided by 400,000, which is 1.5. Because you're looking for the ILWR, not the IIR. All right. Next up will be F5 tomorrow.